Good evening. Welcome to the Hingham Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday evening, January 9th, 2018. The first item on tonight's agenda is the approval of minutes from our January 2nd meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of January 2nd, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You good?
Oh, aye, sorry.
Okay. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Mr. Hersey, could you go to the microphone, please?
Yes, I give you this piece of paper.
Thank you.
Mr. Hersey, this is an internal policy matter. I'm not going to recognize you to discuss this tonight.
Okay,
If you have a
that's-
question about the policy matter, I'm going to
Yeah.
suggest that you take it up with Mr. Mayo.
Okay, that's fine.
Offline.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Oh, I have something else I'd like to have to say.
Okay? If it's
Okay.
on a different subject?
Yeah, on a different subject, yeah. The DPW doesn't have a contract. It's almost 2 years now. What seems to be the stalling point on this?
Yeah, Mr. Hersey, contract negotiations are ongoing with the DPW, and because those are in process, the board really can't comment on them.
Yeah, okay, and the morale has gone down in the DPW. You got a low morale in the fire department, you got a low morale in the police department, okay? And you got sick time problems in the fire department. Overtime money is gone, okay? They used it all in 6 months. So where's the leadership?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hersey.
Thank you for cutting me off.
Next item on the agenda is the Mass DOER Green Communities Program and Hingham. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Brett. Good evening. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening.
Brad, do you have other folks from your committee with you tonight?
I have, not with my committee, but I have Seth Pickering, who's Southeast Regional Coordinator of the Massachusetts DOER.
Welcome.
Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you. And Seth, please chime in at any point. I hope it's okay if I'm here and not over at the podium.
No, that's fine. I think that's a lot easier. So, and the board does have a copy of a presentation. Tom, before we start on this presentation, could I just ask that maybe tomorrow morning it be posted on the website?
Of course.
So that people obviously be able to see it on the wall here, but that way folks can take a look at it.
That'd be great.
So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you again for having me back. You may recall that we were here in May of last year to give an introduction to the Green Communities Program and the interest of the committee to pursue this for the town. We left that meeting with certainly takeaways for our group as we fully anticipated, and then some. Since that time, we've done quite a bit of follow-up. We've also been before advisory committee, and I wanted to give you an update, and specifically with a request for an action for town meeting.
Thank you.
Just as a quick reminder on the first slide.
Nope, up there.
There.
Doing a right button.
That one?
That's what I would have thought. Try it again.
I can advance it on the computer as well.
I could call one of my boys to come down, but I can't do it.
That's what we need as a teenager.
Yeah.
There we go. I don't know if that was you or me. All right, so just a primer on what the Green Community Program is. So it's a Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources designation that essentially makes us available for grants. Thank you. Those grants amounts are done by a formula, but a minimum about $125,000. We would expect more than that. Peer towns have received in this area roughly around $140,000. And so based on our population is a little bit higher, so we may even see something north of that, but I can't say. And once you're a member of this program, not only do you get that initial grant, but you become eligible for future competitive grants through the state that you can apply to various projects in town, all for energy reduction. We would be in very good company if we opted to pursue this. Well over 65% of the state currently lives in a green community. There are 210, 25 just added in December of last year. And you can see that Abington, Duxbury, and Wellesley were recent members, and we're essentially, except for Hull, surrounded by green communities. So it's something that is quite popular in our area. Again, as a reminder, there are 5 criteria for becoming a green community: as of right siting, expedited permitting, the energy baseline and 5-year energy reduction plan, a fuel-efficient vehicle purchase policy, and the stretch code adoption. And it's that last item that we'll want to focus on for this evening, although I'll generally hit on concerns regarding all 5 criteria. And please, at any point, ask questions. So for the stretch energy code, that is the... Oh, that's right. You're good. That is the one item that would require action at town meeting. There was concern that perhaps both items 1 and 2 would as well, but working with Tom Mayo and Emily Wentworth, who have been great assets and very supportive of the effort, we were able to determine that we don't need to pursue action for zoning regulations at town meeting. Our current light industrial regulations and our own expedited permitting provisions satisfy the Mass DOER criteria. With Seth's help as well, we were able to get an informal view from the Mass DOER that is indeed the case. So the only outstanding item there is when we submit our application, a letter from town council would accompany that application saying that, yes, our zoning reg meets the Massachusetts requirement. So that leaves the stretch, the stretch energy code. And we think that the stretch energy code would be a pretty easy lift for us to adopt here in the town. It's very similar to the current base energy code. Because we're surrounded by green communities, the developers in the area are quite familiar with it already. Due to the good work of the building commissioner, many of our projects in town are already voluntarily complying with the performance standards that is required of the stretch energy code. So I can't say we're fully complying with it, but in some respects we are kind of already complying with the stretch energy code.
Could you just give a couple examples of some of the performance standards that might, like what are some examples of things that we would have to do under
Sure.
the stretch energy code?
So there's a HERS rating, which is kind of like an energy efficiency performance rating. One thing that's common is like a blow door test. So how tight is the building that you've built? So you might force air into the house to see what leakage comes out. And that's the type of performance test that you might undergo. Tests of these sort do or can add some costs because you don't have to do it necessarily under the base code. Those costs, it's going to depend on the size of the structure, of course, but we've gotten estimates from other towns of about $1,000 to $3,000 in additional costs it might add on. And you can actually get some of those costs back, both in energy savings and to the extent that you're serviced by an investor-owned utility such as natural gas. Many of those provide their own programs to help reimburse those costs as well. Seth, are there other examples you can think of for the performance testing?
Do I need to be recognized and build a microphone?
You know what, if you could please just go to the microphone or come up to the table, and that's so that the audience, that's the viewing audience, will be able to hear. Sure, sure, thank you. And if you could please just once again introduce yourself.
Sure. Seth Pickering, Department of Energy Resources. I'm the regional coordinator for the Green Communities Division. The stretch code requires performance testing, but there's most of the base code as well requires performance testing. The blower door test that Brad was referring to and duct testing for new residential construction is part of the base code.
There we go.
As
That's
well
why
as
we
the
bring
stretch
Seth
code.
along.
The biggest difference is for new residential construction. As part of the building permit application package, a home energy rating score, HERS rater, would perform a computer-based model, really, of the building, and would come up with a HERS score, and that score needs to be a 55 or lower to meet the stretch code. So those are the basic performance requirements of the stretch code. Here in town, currently, any building permits that are issued for renovations or additions are already as base code requirements, meeting the same requirements of the stretch code. So for those, there would be no new requirements.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate
Sure.
that. And we've met with Michael Clancy to get his views on this. Like I said, he's voluntarily requesting that many of the developers already meet these performance standards, and he's in favor of the stretch energy code for the town as well. So we feel quite good about that. There are plenty of resources available in the Mass DOR. They provide a sample warrant article and bylaw, so it's pretty easy to put this together to move for adoption in the town. So unless there are further questions specifically in the stretch energy code, I'd like to move more into the program generally, just to address the cost concerns that were raised both by this body as well as the advisory committee.
Thank you.
Because of course, if it's not just the stretch energy code, it's the whole program itself. What are we signing ourselves up for? A couple of things. There's the energy baseline. So one of the criteria of the program is to conduct an energy baseline across the town and then work towards a 20% reduction over a 5-year period. So in order to do that energy baseline, you have to assess what is the energy usage of the municipality. A couple of ways to go about doing that. For areas serviced by investor-owned utilities, such as natural gas usage, all that information is already captured and uploaded into Mass Energy Insight, which is the state's, it's their system for managing all of the energy usage, and it's quite convenient. It has a web interface that makes it available on a town level, so it's pretty easy to follow and to see. HMLP, Mr. Hano's here tonight, a member of our committee and also supportive of the effort. They are currently working to upload HMLP account data into Mass Energy Insight as we speak, so that should also be completed. The only open question then really for conducting the energy baseline is oil-based heat. So what buildings in town make use of that, and then we'd have to undergo some manual effort to figure that out and then to categorize that. But otherwise, much of the energy baseline would be done through those two avenues that I had mentioned. For completing that effort, assistance is available. We are a member of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC. They make technical grants available to help conduct this energy baseline as well as the 20% plan reduction. Those grants become available in May of this year, or should be if it's the same as last year, and we can't guarantee, but we would be good candidates for getting such a grant to help us with the effort. Then there's the cost to implement the energy reduction plan. So what is that cost? Well, theoretically, it should be zero. And how I come to that conclusion is on two bases. The first is we're going to get an initial grant from the state, which could be, as I mentioned, a minimum of $125,000, could be more. And you can set aside or you use those monies towards your 20% reduction. And then you can also apply for competitive grants to continue to meet those reduction needs. I also base it off, as we'll get to later, surveyed other towns that have been green communities either recently or for many years now, and every one of them came back and said the cost towards the 20% reduction has been zero. And that is because of the multiple grants that they've received over the years. And when those costs are not only towards the actual reduction itself, but whatever manpower is expended to help implement that reduction. So if staff are used in a town as part of their normal job, they're now spending some time on green communities activities, the town can be reimbursed through the grant process for that effort. The other thing is the 20% reduction is a goal. It's not a mandate. People do fail. Hanover has been a green community now for over 7 years. They were one of the initial members. At the end of their 5-year period, they had achieved a 15% reduction. No penalty. They're not kicked out of the program. They're not slapped on the wrist. As part of their reporting to Mass DOR, they said, we're just happy to see you working towards that goal, and we'll work with you to continue to work towards that goal. So not setting ourselves up here to say we don't have to achieve it. Of course, we'll want to try, but there don't seem to be any consequences if you don't in a good faith effort.
And could you give us some examples about the changes that departments or various town buildings would need to implement to work toward this energy reduction?
It's really going to be based on a town-by-town basis. So, for example, I know that many of our school departments or our school buildings, some of them have outdated boiler systems. They are expensive to replace. They were woefully inefficient. using grant money to replace those boilers could go a long ways to helping reduce the energy usage for that particular building, which would factor into the overall reduction within the town.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next item is the fuel-efficient vehicle purchase policy. So that is a requirement that as you replace new vehicles in your fleet, that they meet certain MPG criteria. Our committee has done an inventory with Tom's assistance of all the vehicles in the town, and we've determined that if every vehicle that exists today were simply replaced with the next model, we would satisfy the requirements of Mass DOER. What is helped by that too is that there are many vehicles that are exempt, police cruisers, for example. So really this is not an issue that we think we'll encounter here. Other towns have not. The one sticking point can be repurposing of vehicles. So if your vehicle is exempt under the policy, but you attempt to repurpose it for a non-exempt reason, as in passing it from one, like retiring an old police cruiser and now it's going to become someone's regular car in town, that is not looked upon favorably. Some ways around that is a grant to get a lease for a new vehicle that will comply with the requirements. So it's not something we wouldn't necessarily have to deal with, but again, in the experience of other towns, it has resulted in no cost to the town to comply. And then lastly, annual costs. So there's annual reporting that will need to be undertaken. That will require effort. The experience of other towns ranges from, and again, we can go over this on the last slide, but about 0.05 FTEs, as in a couple days over the course of the year. To Hanover, they indicated that almost 4 days a month is dedicated towards reporting, but that's in part because they've had multiple competitive grants over the years, so they're not only reporting under the regular Green Communities program, but in getting additional grants and satisfying whatever reporting came from those, they have some effort expended there.
So, Brad, if I may?
Sure.
They've also gotten just about $1 million in grant money from us since 2010, so.
Exactly. And that grant money is used to pay those expenses for meeting those reporting requirements. So again, no cost to Hanover to implement. So then I know I've kind of worked in the experience of other towns as I've been speaking with you, but this slide is kind of a summary of that. I think the main thing to hit on is the reactions have been overwhelmingly positive. We've asked every town, hey, on a scale of 1 being awful to 5 being phenomenal, what's been your experience? And everyone's given us a 5. No one regrets it. They just have said it's done excellent work for them. Seth, they couldn't say enough good things about Seth and their experience with Mass DOR, as well as being great resources and partners in helping this. The program is really designed to get towns involved, provide resources to reduce energy, and it's more a partnership. It's not no one's wagging your finger and kind of like saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. So it's been really a positive experience for everyone. And so when I tried to put together a pros and cons summary as a takeaway, I was not trying to stack the deck. It's easy to make these things in a way to achieve an outcome that you want. And you can accuse me of being biased, of course, of wanting to move forward on this. But really, I think the pros far outweigh the cons here. If you look at the cons, it's really the reporting obligations. We are signing ourselves up for that. The limitations on the repurposing of vehicles under the policy, that could potentially cause issues in this town, because I know we do repurpose, so it's something we'll have to be mindful of. There is going to be effort expended.
We sort of wear that as a badge of honor, frankly.
There's definitely the energy baseline effort, and there's the adoption of the stretch code, but we're doing much of that already. Those are really the things that we're signing ourselves up for.
In other towns, Brad, who
Yep.
typically does the reporting? Is there a common department within the municipal government that handles the reporting?
Right. Again, it varies. Typically, I shouldn't even say typically, but it might be town administration, it might be the building commission if they have a dedicated Energy Committee like we do, they may lean on that group to help support that effort. But it's going to be someone certainly employed in the town, because you'll need access to town systems and personnel who have the data that's going to be needed as part of that annual reporting.
Thank you.
But that's something too that, my committee, speaking, I chair it, I can't speak for everyone on the committee, but we're all very excited about this, and I feel comfortable saying that we would assist the town in whatever way possible in
Thank you.
future implementation.
Do we have a sense of how many buildings are oil dependent that wouldn't be part of the MEI upload?
I don't, to be honest. I'm not even sure there aren't any. I know much of it is natural gas. Many of the main buildings are, but
We have a couple schools that are electric. I think Plymouth River, I
Plymouth
think,
River is
is
electric,
electric.
Okay.
I
so no-
remember when we
Sure.
pulled
Okay.
all of the records of town buildings, I was shocked at actually how many there were. So we're familiar with the previous work our committee does of the larger buildings, but there are some small ones here or there that I've never been in, and I just presume maybe some of them have oil, but we'd have to chase that down.
Okay.
And so then really there's just a lot of possibility for savings over the years that we can get from this, not through just the initial grant, but future grants as well. I always like to put in the plug too that it's only through some fortunate circumstances that we're even eligible to apply for this. And as we mentioned right back in May, because of a few power customers that are serviced by investor-owned utilities, we're able to participate in this program. Normally municipalities are not. Municipalities serviced by a municipal-owned utility are not. So what does this mean? What do we need to do to move this forward? So we've got, sorry, thank you, Tom. So we've got the
Teamwork, Brad.
we've got the January 20th deadline for submission of warrant articles. So we'd ask that the selectmen move a warrant article submission forward for the stretch energy code. We'd like to have a public meeting on that within a month to a month and a half. That way it'll give members of the community as well as developers a chance to voice concerns. Stretch energy code adoption used to be far more contentious going back 5-6 years than it is today, because there was a large divergence between the base energy code and the stretch energy code. That's, as Seth has already indicated, very much narrowed. And because we're surrounded by green communities and developers that are living with it anyway, I personally don't anticipate much of an issue from the development community, but want to give them a chance to voice concerns. We'll continue to engage other towns beyond just the South Shore to understand their experiences, as well as look for opportunities to do joint projects. It is possible to get joint grants to share resource loads, and some towns have already expressed an interest in perhaps doing that with us, so there could be great opportunities there. We've engaged with the school committee already, and they're certainly I was going to say excited. I don't know if I can go that far without them here to voice that themselves, but there's certainly been a willingness to engage with us on this, because there are great opportunities in the schools, and the schools are our largest buildings that could truly benefit from this program. So we'll look to address specific projects that could go into a grant application. In May and June, then, we would look, as I said before, with doing the energy baseline, to apply for a technical grant to get assistance in putting that baseline together, as well as a 20% reduction. And then the Mass DOER allows you to submit a preliminary application in the summer to get initial feedback. So I'd love to be in a position to take advantage of that to ensure as smooth an actual application process, which would occur in the fall. And then we would find out in December of this year whether or not we've been designated. So I apologize for going on and on.
Very
but
helpful.
if I'm happy to take any questions.
Paul, any questions?
I'm set, thank you.
Yeah, two quick questions. In terms of the initial grant writing, is that something you think the Energy Action Committee would undertake, or would you be looking for town side administrative support for that?
Right, so I think it would be a partnership, and Tom, I don't mean to speak of you, but I anticipate our committee working closely with Tom and the Building Commission on putting together that application. There's just, again, going to be information that will be required that we as a committee would not have access to and would need to lead on town resources.
Okay. And then the other question is just with respect to the stretch energy code required for new homes and large commercial building construction. I'm assuming there's some sort of square footage test for the large commercial?
Yes, there is. So the two commercial aspects that can be affected by the stretch code are laboratories and supermarkets, 40,000 square feet and greater.
Okay.
And industrial commercial, 100,000 square feet and greater, which, you know, with the Hingham industrially zoned land, I mean, it's possible you may have some buildings that are affected. Most of the builders or developers of those type of buildings already do more than what's required by the energy code because it's worth it to them. You know, it really drives down their overhead to have a good energy efficient building from the get-go.
Okay. And then in terms of new home construction, if this code were enacted, a homeowner from building a new home would have to comply with the stretch energy code, right? And I'm assuming there'd be some additional cost to the homeowner for that testing to demonstrate compliance with the stretch energy code.
So I can comment on that if you'd like. So the performance test is essentially the same as the
Right,
base
as you
code.
mentioned,
The additional cost comes from the computer program and the modeling that's done by the HERS rater to get to that 55 HERS rating score. And there are some other material requirements that might be a little bit extra. And so, you know, houses the size of the houses that are built here in Hingham, the 1,000 to maybe 3,000 at the most extra cost is probably accurate. Those costs that are extra from the HERS rater and the computer modeling can be mitigated by rebates and incentives that are available from National Grid Gas if it's a naturally if it's a natural gas home.
Okay.
So those costs can be mitigated. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to send you some cost-benefit analyses that we've done on, typical homes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And so you can take a look at that because there's not just the cost, there's additional cost up front, but then your cost benefit because the whole point of the stretch code is for it to be, a cost over the life of the building.
Right, so what's the buyback period?
To be
right,
reduced,
yeah.
And basically energy usage reduced because of the measures you take up front.
Great,
And
thank you.
just to clarify with the stretch code as a follow-on to Karen's question, this would only be for a new home. So, sometimes in Hingham, we have, a small home that undergoes this transformation and goes from, 1,500 square feet to, thousands. But would that be required to follow this code, or is it only new from the ground up?
So that would be up to your building inspector in terms of, I don't know what his requirements would be as to whether that would be considered a new home or not. But if it were considered a new home, it would have to comply with the stretch code. If it was not, it would have to just do the base code.
That would be an important thing to nail down
Yep.
because, in Hingham, we don't have a lot of buildable space anymore. So the new homes are fewer and far between, but there is an awful lot of activity with the adding on, and I think it's going to be important that we understand the potential impact of that.
Yep.
So I know we need to be brave, but there is one very, in a town like this, there's one very beneficial aspect of the base code, of the stretch code. The base code is very prescriptive. It says you must do X, Y, and Z, and that's the way it has to be. With the stretch code and the computer program that's available, you can have things that offset themselves. So if you're working with an architect, if you have certain aspects of your home, if you live next to the ocean, you live in an area where you want to have certain aspects look and feel the way you want them to, it's easier, believe it or not, to build your home with the stretch code than it is to use the base code.
Karen, did you have any other?
No, very
One
thorough.
quick follow-up too, if you
Please.
don't mind, just since we're on that stretch energy code. One thing to be aware of is that once you adopt it, you agree to adopt all future versions as well. So just like the base
Okay.
energy code, the stretch energy code will be updated over time, and we would automatically adopt that if it becomes available.
That's
If it's
good.
ever problematic, we
Yep.
can always, as a town, choose to go back to the base energy code.
Two quick questions, Brad. You said that you talked to the school department. Did you present in a public meeting to them, or?
No,
was
not
it
yet. This has been behind
Okay.
behind the scenes reach out to
Okay.
say, here's what we're doing, we'd like to talk
I'm
to
always
you.
a little sensitive. In the school department, I know one of the things that they get a lot of pressure on is all these kind of unfunded mandates and things. And I think it will be important to engage with them. And then my final question, we're talking about, a lot of potential new buildings in Hingham, potentially a new foster school, potentially a new fire station. Is grant money available for new construction of facilities?
I believe it would be.
So not through my program.
Okay,
So your schools, we would have you work with the resources that National Grid could provide you for design purposes and energy efficiency. And MSBA is going to make you do things
sure, I mean.
Right.
in
We-
accordance
we
with the
do all
stretch
the
code
lead-
and other
right.
things, right?
Yeah,
Because
we
they're
do
going to
all
be.
the lead certification. But so let's say, just hypothetically again, because I just want to understand the program.
Yep.
So let's say we go into the program and we've got to do this 20% energy reduction, and we say, we've got this school, foster school, and, we're going to build a new school, and we're going to do it with, we're going to put some things in place to make it more energy efficient. Does that count towards the 20%
So
reduction?
your new school would not be included in the baseline that the 20% reduction needed to come from, because it's going to be new, it's going to be after the baseline year. And so the way that's looked at by us is that's new, and it doesn't fall under the requirements of your initial submittal, okay?
But we'd be losing the inefficiencies of the old building, right?
Right, so depending on, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but we do have ways that we can account for where you are, on tracking your overall energy usage based on building stock changes and square footage and things like that. And certainly, almost every new school or new building that's built now is more energy efficient, at least on a per square foot basis, than the ones that are being replaced. A lot of new schools they use more energy because they have more energy in, intensive
Yes.
requirements. But believe it or not, they're more energy efficient on a per square foot basis.
Sure, I don't discount that. I guess what I'm just thinking about, and
Yeah, yeah.
something for us to think about, is that we've got 4 or 5 potential large building projects, and to the extent that anything we do in those buildings, especially if it's a new building, doesn't count, it's fewer assets by which we have to achieve that 20%. So
Can be.
it just,
Yep.
it's something to keep in mind as we move forward. So, is there anybody from the audience who has a question or wishes to make a comment on this? Or, please, could you come up to the mic and?
Just a quick question, what you said, because it doesn't make sense, what
Could
you,
just
Dwayne
ident-
Oser?
Sure, and your
74
address? Thank you.
Thaxton Street. So, if it's being replaced, does that then fall out of the base of the measurement of the whole thing? Because,
Depends on whether the building gets reused or whether it gets raised or,
but if it gets raised, assume it gets raised,
Yep.
and it goes away, does that reduce? So you were worried about, okay, we have this big 20% number we have to get, we have all these buildings, now we have fewer buildings, how do we get there?
We would look at the new building, look at the square footage, which is probably gonna be larger, and we would prorate it. And again, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but
Sure.
it's in the program for building stock changes where you're either building new schools or whatever. It's accounted for, and, we try to make sure that it works well within the reduction plan.
Okay.
So we don't go from 20 buildings to 15 buildings and still have to reduce,
But
we had
that's-
to reduce from 20 buildings then. I'm just saying, if it went that way.
So that's something I can't predict because I can't predict the future.
Sure.
If I could, I wouldn't be doing that. But,
Why not?
but,
You love this.
But, we would work with you and however that plays out. It's probably still too far,
Yeah.
ahead of you to know exactly
Sure.
how your funding and, and how your budgets are gonna look. But
One thing-
we will work with you on that.
Sure.
We've had other towns you know, in the area, including Hanover, they built a new high school.
I was just thinking, we could maybe, you know,
Yeah,
you've
we
done
could
such
go
great
to
work
school.
talking to other communities. This might, you know, Brad, is just a follow-up to, you know, Hanover has some new facilities.
Yep.
It might be worth getting some of that information.
Absolutely, we can
to,
certainly ask around. I would say, too, that the 20% reduction plan, it's not that once we get approved, you have to reduce by 20%, see you in 5 years. It's a planning process.
Sure.
And it's something that will be revisited every year as we
Sure.
work towards the goal, and that includes informing Mass DOR and working with them. So all of these things that come up during that time period will be discussed and addressed at that time.
Thank you. Paul, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, I just, Paul Hingham from the Light Plant. I just want to remind everybody that Hanover's experience was 7 years they hadn't hit the 20%, and nobody came and tried to take money back from them. It's a goal, so, you know, in terms of what your denominator is or your numerator is when you're trying to get to that number, it's not something, it doesn't appear that it's something that's set in stone, that if you don't hit that 20,
Sure.
you know, we're looking for all our dough back.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And just before you leave the microphone, I just have to say, my lights were on for the last week. And I just want to take this opportunity and sidetrack to thank you and your team. You know, during storms and things, as you read that other municipalities are out of power and the lights aren't on and, you know, nobody's answering the phone at that big utility. You know, we're all sitting cozy and warm in our houses, and I know there was one small transformer that went, and I heard it was up and going in 15 minutes. And
Yeah, it was-
you know, you had crew on staff in the event that things happen and people to answer the phones. And please thank your team on behalf
Thank you, I will.
of this
Yeah, we were
board.
fully staffed, you know, everybody was over, they had their air mattresses out, and, you know, we spent money that, you know, if fortunately we didn't have to put people out in the street, but that's the kind of insurance I'll happily pay all the time.
And I know that a lot of the work that goes towards keeping the lights on is trimming all the trees and making sure those lines aren't obstructed during the year. So, you know, it's a year-round effort, and again, we're just really appreciative
Well,
of it.
thank you so much, I appreciate this kind.
Thanks,
Anybody else? Brad, I think oh, I'm sorry.
Could make a small comment.
Sure, and if you could come to the mic, please.
Mike Kuchar, 25 Rice Road, member of the Energy Action Committee. So today I spoke with a gentleman from Lakeville. He's their general building inspector, I believe that is the formal title. Among other things, he told me that they recently completed a school rebuild project for one of, I think, an elementary school that they used $285,000 in grant money, and I don't know if, Seth, you're more familiar with the details. And he said on top of the grant money they used for construction, they are also now saving $33,000 in annual costs in operating electricity and heat.
Great, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
here to answer
Thank
questions
you.
if necessary.
No, that's-
Yeah, we can talk about
Yeah.
any of that another time. I know
Sure.
this condensed schedule. You know, but as Paul said, you know, 15% of your energy budget is 15% of your energy budget. It's a pretty decent number for a town this size.
Sure, thank you. And first of all, thank you, and thank you and the committee for all the great work. In particular, I really appreciate that you've reached out to other communities. You know, kind of hearing people's experience, hearing what's going on. I think that's really helpful. We have another meeting next Tuesday. We are mindful that January 20th is the end of next week. I think what we typically do, and what I'm going to recommend we do this evening, because I kind of want to process everything I've heard.
Sure.
Is to take this up again next week and make a decision about a warrant article for this year. If a warrant article is submitted, there will be public hearings, both here with the Selectmen and here with the advisory committee. So if we do go ahead, you know, you talked about having a public meeting. I just think it might be a good idea to coordinate some of that.
Absolutely.
Because it'll be part of the hearing process, and I think that'll just make things a lot easier. What I might suggest to my colleagues is that if we have any additional questions or concerns, that we relay those to Tom, who can relay those to you, so that if we have any other questions, we'll get those to you as soon as possible, and then we can take this up again next week.
Absolutely.
And that also gives interested members of the public the opportunity as well to, come to the meeting or to drop us a note. So that would be helpful too.
Absolutely, I know, I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, no, really appreciate the
Thanks for being here.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item that we have on the agenda is, it's a little bit procedural, and that is the review of proposed recreation marijuana warrant articles. And before I ask Mr. Mayo to walk through these articles, I just want to mention for the public watching and the public here, we're not going to have a hearing on the merits of these articles tonight. Tonight is about putting these articles into the warrant. And if they go into the warrant, then the advisory committee and this board would have publicly posted hearings. So, so that's kind of where we're headed. If people have thoughts or a point of view on the article itself or the substance, we can discuss that. But in terms of the discussion about the merits of the article, that'll be in a publicly posted hearing, so where all interested parties can come together. So, Tom, if you can walk us through what we have.
Sure, we prepared 2 articles that Town Council has identified as necessary for the marijuana, the new marijuana law discussion that's going to be taking place this coming April. So if you think of warrant articles as questions, we have 2 questions in essence being posed here. One is a question of a tax and whether or not and what level to apply a tax to the sale of any marijuana products, marijuana products. And the other is a question of a ban or not. So those are the 2 questions that we're looking to pose to town meeting and have the board include in the warrant.
Before I ask my colleague if there are questions, I know we have a couple people here in the audience. Does anybody want to see these articles? Okay. I'd be happy to kind of share copies. So I'm going to give my colleagues a few minutes just to ask questions. Kirk, if you want to look on with someone who's taken a look. Paul, any questions about the articles?
As framed tonight, no.
Okay.
My sense is these articles then are in addition to what the planning board would put forth, right, on the zoning side.
Yes,
Right.
so there are some necessary zoning articles and necessary general bylaw articles. These are the general bylaw articles.
And all we're trying to do is set ourselves up to anticipate the breadth of questions, both in terms of, the very basic ban, no ban, sales tax, no sales tax, what the rate of sales tax is, and then if in fact town meeting were to approve non-medical marijuana establishments in Hingham, the articles put forth by the planning board would deal with where those would be and the siting and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and there are 2 things that I would just reference. First of all, the fact that the board is putting forth these articles, we don't have a position on these articles. I haven't seen enough about what the planning board has said, and for me personally, how these things might be regulated would inform a decision on a ban. The taxation piece, this is intended to be, the taxation is a tool that the state is providing. We have a fiduciary responsibility to put forward revenue opportunities for the town, whether it's, a good idea or not. But what we were also told early on a few months ago, we did have citizens that came who said, if the town is not going to put forward a warrant article to potentially ban these establishments, that they were intending to do that as citizens. Our thought was, let's use our office, let's use our legal counsel to put these in good working order so that they can get the due diligence in the hearing process that they can. So one of these articles is a general bylaw that would support a zoning bylaw that the planning board is preparing that is asking town meeting if it wants to ban the establishments. The way I've heard Mary Savage Dunham talk about it, it's belt and suspenders. Other communities have had both a zoning and a general bylaw. Then our second one is taxation. as Karen said, the planning board is developing warrant articles that would regulate the time, manner, and place, where establishments could be located, how they would operate, et cetera. Our board has not seen those yet. So we haven't seen them yet. So is there anyone in the public who has a comment or a question? Kirk, could you go up to the mic if you could?
Kirk Schultz, I'm a member of the Hingham Board of Health, and the Board of Health is going to provide information regarding the health aspect of marijuana. We're going to have an article for the Hingham Journal coming up in which we describe a number of pieces, because there's so much misinformation about this. It's new, it's something that people are both frightened about and excited. And so we want to bring across the fact that there already is an existing regulation in town banning various aspects of marijuana use, and that's within Board of Health regulations. They've been there for years. Many people don't know that. And we want to talk about additionally the addictive component, how it affects children, and also there's a medical component. As everyone knows, the difference between THC and cannabinoids, and the medical aspect of marijuana, that's going to be going away. It'll be wrapped into the retail sales. And so I just wanted to come here tonight and tell you that we're going to be providing the town with that information, because Karen said there's going to be a full breadth of discussion. And so instead of it going night after night, let's get that information out early, and that way we're educated and make an informed decision about what it is we're going to do, because there's so many options about that.
That's great. And you know, Kirk, I'd encourage the Board of Health as well to use your website to the extent that you have articles or information. I'd put it out there on the website as well, so that people who don't subscribe to the Journal would potentially have access to it too. I think we have a big education responsibility to the town, not just on the subject matter, but also just procedurally on how do these different warrant articles work. And it's going to be important that we work together to educate the community so that people at town meeting feel like they're making an informed decision. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else in the audience want a comment or question? Okay. I think we would then be making two votes, which are to submit the warrant articles for consideration for the 2018 annual town meeting. So would you, Paul, like to?
Sure. I'll move that we vote to submit the attached warrant article for acceptance of General Law, Chapter 64 and Section 3, local sales tax on the sale or transfer of marijuana or marijuana products by a marijuana retail, for inclusion on the warrant for the 2018 annual town meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
You want to do the next one?
Sure. I move that we submit the attached warrant article for the ban of marijuana establishments as defined in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 94G, Section 1, for inclusion on the warrant for the 2018 annual town meeting.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have two warrant articles.
All right, here we go.
Off to a good
Tell Betty.
start.
Can we stop it there?
Get the binder, yeah, get the binders ready.
I would just mention to Paul and Karen that I've had a little bit of conversation with Lucy Hancock, who's the chair of the advisory committee, about.
She was here, and
Who was here.
Yeah.
About perhaps sometime in March, after the warrant has gone to press, to convene some sort of a public meeting that would serve to just, again, further this education on the subject of marijuana, both in terms of what the articles are speaking to, how it would be regulated. We don't want to take the debate off the town meeting floor, but we do want to make sure that people understand what the decisions
What they're voting on, yep.
how it might work, what they're voting on. So we've just sort of talked about that possibility. So more details to come.
Okay.
Tom, any appointments?
No appointments.
Okay. Town administrator report?
None.
Okay.
Are we going to do these other votes?
Oh, yes. Now we'll do the votes. We have a couple of, again, committees we've checked and they are no longer active, so I'd like to make a motion to discharge with thanks the 2006 School Building Committee.
Second.
And third, they did a great job.
Yeah.
Very hard working group.
Some of those members served 9 years, two
Yep.
schools. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. That's impressive.
You want to take the next one?
Sure. I would move that we discharge with thanks the Special Education Working Group. This was a group that was convened together with the Board of Selectmen, the school committee, and the advisory committee to work on smoothing out special education costs across the town, and resulted in an establishment of a reserve fund for that purpose. So good work to that group.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to discharge the Historic Archives Task Force.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I didn't, in particular, a lot of great work was done on that.
Yep.
And appreciate everybody's effort. And then lastly, I'll make a motion to discharge the Permanent Building and Facility Management Study Committee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so now, Selectman report?
I'd just like to thank the police and fire, as well as the DPW, for the great job they did, as always, during the past storm. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Me too. I mean, it was a really phenomenal effort. This is the first time that I've gone through one of these major storms as part of the Board of Selectmen. Tom Mayo kept us updated. We have access to state resources in MEMA and our own emergency preparedness planning. So it really was an incredible effort on the front end to anticipate, I think, the needs of the town. And then, Hingham Light Plant, police, fire, SHREC, DPW, being there around the clock to make sure that we are safe and sound, and we had access to our roads. So it was really an incredible effort.
Just before we adjourn, I think on behalf of this board and really the entire town, we would like to extend our condolences to the family and friends of Ginny Gray. Mrs. Gray passed away this past weekend, and her legacy of accomplishments in Hingham is just formidable. She was involved in civic work, the 4th of July Parade Committee. She was a registrar. Many of you, she was the first person that you saw when you checked into town meeting or when you went to vote. She was involved in the Rotary. She was one of the founders of what is now the Hingham Maritime Center. And a very active member of the Maritime Center, the Hingham Yacht Club, other boating organizations. I remember the first time I met her, we were on the 4th of July Parade Committee together, and we were trying to figure out vehicles for all of the dignitaries that ride in kind of the first unit of the parade. So you have the Citizen of the Year and the Veteran of the Year and other people. And we were trying to figure out where to get all these cars, and we were a little bit short. And we come to the next meeting, and wouldn't you know it, she bought herself a convertible. And she drove the convertible, and she drove, I think it was the Citizen of the Year.
Spectacular.
And, that was an example of problem solving. And anyway, for those who, for her friends and for her family, we offer our condolences and our deep, deep appreciation for all of her many contributions to just making this a wonderful community. So on that, our next meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday. Mr. Mayo tells me we're going to have a full agenda getting ready for the warrant. So I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everybody.